Hello everyone. Today I'll present a piece of work on modeling the cortical visual processing using a deep recurrent neural net. The goal of this study is to build a computational model to understand how the brain processes spatial and temporal visual information in the brain. To achieve this goal, we first rely on a class of deep neural net called convolutional neural net. A convolutional neural net is designed for analysis of single images to support image classification. It consists of a hierarchical structure that extracts progressively abstract spatial visual features, as is shown here. Here is an example of what it can do: image recognition in real time. Nowadays, CNN has enabled computer vision to recognize natural images to a human-like level. So, how does it compare to our visual system then? Here is a posterior view of the brain, showing the visual cortex. A study using fMRI imaging during subject viewing static images has shown that CNN can predict the activity in the visual cortex, mostly up to the lateral occipital area, which are the region roughly covered by the blue lines. Notice that the predictable area showing here are somewhat spotty. But we all know that our visual world is not static. When we acquire much more fMRI data from subjects watching hours of natural movies, we found that the CNN can actually predict activity in widespread cortical areas beyond the blue regions. It extends to the ventral areas, including PPA, FFA, extend to the middle temporal complex, and even to the lateral intraparietal cortex in the dorsal area. This has inspired us to further question the use of CNNs as computational models of the visual cortex. Last year, we have presented here work on using a CNN to decode cortical neural activity. It is shown that the CNN can be used to not only reconstruct, but also categorize what a person sees. Moreover, as the model establishes the computational path that accounts for the neural activity, we dissect the model to visualize and understand the information coded at the individual cortical location. For example, the model reports the focal receptive field property of voxels in V2. Voxels in LO encode parts of foreground object. Voxels in FFA are sensitive to faces, and PPA extract information solely about backgrounds and buildings. Despite all these phenomena emerging from CNN, they are still far from proper models of the visual cortex because they just don't have the mechanism to process temporal information. On the other hand, our visual system deals with temporal information all the time. Hassan et al. Coined a notion of temporal receptive window in sensory processing. Just like the brain integrates more and more abstract spatial features, spatial information in the visual cortex downstream, temporal receptive window says that the brain also integrates information over time to account for the current brain activity. Such temporal characteristics also varies across cortical regions. For example, early visual area integrates less information over time, whereas the higher order visual area integrates longer information in order to recognize an object or an action. So we further ask the question, can we build a model to capture such temporal characteristics while not losing the ability of mapping spatial property as revealed by CNN? Recall that CNNs are models made for recognizing isolated images. They consider no relationship between frames. However, obviously, video frames are temporally related. Therefore, we change the CNN in time by adding temporal recurrent connections. This is our proposed recurrent neural net for modeling the visual processes in the brain. We hypothesize this model captures both spatial and temporal characteristics of the visual processing in the brain. We train such RNN model independently of the brain on the task of action recognition. We present various video clips to the model, one after another continuously, and inform the model the action each clip belonged to at the beginning of each clip. The performance was summarized in the table. CNN as a baseline, a static model, achieved performance at 65%, whereas RNN improved by a large margin to 76%. It's worth noticing that our model performed similarly to a state-of-art model using the same training strategy, but with only about 1/3 of the model parameter space. This is important because otherwise RNNs are typically too complex to interpret. After training, we would like to link the units in the model to the voxels in the brain. To do so, we extract feature representations from the model and linearly project them to each voxel's activity through dimensional reduction and linear regression. We establish such a relationship using training movies, but we evaluate the model using new testing movies which were not used during training. Our result of prediction accuracy show that even though CNN can predict activity in widespread cortical areas, RNN can predict even better. Difference in their performance manifests that the improvement appeared at various cortical visual areas and was the most prominent along the dorsal stream. In fact, comparing the prediction accuracy at ROI level showed that RNN outperformed CNN in explaining the cortical activity at all these visual regions. But being a better predictive model is not the end of story. Just like CNN can reveal the spatial hierarchy along the visual pathways downstream, we found that RNN also preserves and maps such spatial property in the visual cortex. Then we wonder, how does RNN capture temporal dynamics, and how does it report about temporal receptive window? Imagine a movie is playing. As time goes on, a RNN unit responds to the movie's stimuli by considering each past frame dynamically. Extracting such dynamics, we found that in general, a unit's current response is influenced by recent frames more than distant frames. Moreover, the dynamics for multiple units were combined to represent a voxel's dynamics through the established relationship. As a result, through the model, we quantified the voxel's dynamics to the movie stimuli. The dynamics, again, described the influence of each past frame on the voxel's current activity. From there, we characterized the information accumulation over time that account for the current cortical activity. We found that the behaviors of temporal integration vary across cortical regions. Particularly, a gradient of temporal hierarchy was observed along the visual pathways. Indeed, the temporal receptive window at the voxel level manifests that the window length is shortest at the foveal early visual areas, getting longer to the peripheral, and even longer downstream to the higher order visual areas. Here, we summarized average window length at various ROIs. It is shown that the early visual area, shown as the blue bars, has the shortest window length on average, followed by that at the ventral area, shown as a green bar. Yet, the dorsal area, shown as the red bars, has the longest window length on average. Here we also present the result for the other two subjects, mainly for showing consistent findings. To conclude, we have compared a model with temporal structures against one without in terms of predicting cortical activity and in revealing the working principles of the visual cortex. It realized that RNN was a superior predictive model to the CNN, and it preserved the spatial property as revealed by the CNN as well. But most importantly, it is the first time a hierarchical recurrent neural net was shown to capture and report the temporal hierarchy of the visual processing in the brain. Here, I would like to acknowledge all my lab members and the funding agencies. Thank you for your attention.
The floor is open for questions.
Hi. Really nice work.
Thank you.
From what I understand, you've been able to map the spatial and temporal. Have you thought about looking at other measures of hierarchy, like category specificity?
Oh, yeah. So there is also an ongoing work on categorical selectivity in our lab, but this is just not what my work is focusing on. Yeah.
Thank you for this piece of work.
Thank you.
I was just wondering whether it's possible to extend this type of methodology beyond the visual system, namely to look at the spatiotemporal process terminating in the multimodal association areas. So essentially integrating information across space and time beyond only visual information.
Yeah, definitely. So this is definitely possible, and it's interesting to using this type of framework to model not only visual, but also, for example, auditory processing in the brain. So it has been, well, actually, in terms of the model, it has been demonstrated that the model is able to capture these various dynamics. But yeah, we're just looking forward to someone who will be working on this in the future.
For the work and
Could you
as
speak louder? Yeah.
So as I understand, you train your model CNN and RNN using the natural image or natural movies. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes. And
Yeah.
have you ever thought about to train CNN or RNN using our brain data itself and to predict the response or images?
Yeah, that's well, yeah, we thought about that.
But not tried.
Not
yet?
yet. Not yet. Yes.
So
It's actually well, yeah, we haven't tried it yet, but we think we're gonna try it.
Okay.
Hi. So I saw that the upper limit was something around 15, 18 seconds or something
Oh,
like
yeah.
that. And what was the duration of the clips that you used?
Oh, yeah, so that's a good point. So that number is definitely a relative scale. So the movie we use to quantify that characteristics indeed has about an upper bound of 15, 18 seconds. Yes.
Speculate. Do you think you would be able to find results that with longer clips?
I think so.
But you don't?
Not yet, yeah, because it will take time to collect more data. That's, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.